So many of you are probably wondering why Cyberpunk was one of the most controversial of games before it was released. Like, the fact it's been released and it's terrible in terms of optimization, broken promises, etc., that's all fine. It's fine that it's controversial now, okay? But it was controversial years before it was even released. And there's a bunch of reasons for this. The first, and I'm not going to show you any of the specifics of this, so you'll just have to take my word for it from someone who was there. There was always a bit of a fractious relationship between the games press and CD Projekt Red. Very often, you know, there was the usual kind of pieces like The Witcher, is it too white, you know, and things like this. And because CDPR would have little barbs and stingers aimed at the journalists that wrote those kind of ludicrously terrible think pieces, what would happen is, obviously, journalists, you're not allowed to insult or criticize journalists now. They all galvanize, they're all on their Slack group with each other, and they come up with plans to basically ruin you, ruin your business, ruin your company. And they never forget and they never forgive. That's why they're still talking about a fucking hashtag 7 years later, you know. That's just how it operates now. All journalists at all levels are a cabal, and they look to take down anyone that commits the heinous act of mocking them. That's how you end up with situations like CNN doxing someone for sharing a Donald Trump wrestling meme and then forcing them to apologize and delete the posts and saying, we reserve the right to release your information should any of your behavior change. And the world just sat back and said, yeah, it's totally fine that a huge corporate-owned news entity is doing this to a private citizen. It's just how we live. And it's not as big or as grandiose in the games journalist world, but they all operate on the same principle, which is if you mock one of them, you mock all of them, you will be punished for that mockery. They're not taking it anymore. So CD Projekt Red had a big target on their back. Then next up, this is kind of where it all starts. They were accused of transphobia while they were marketing the game. And Polygon here have this. This was one of the earliest kind of, you know, big offensive presses that was coming on. This is back in 2018. Now, why would you want to accuse CD Projekt Red of transphobia? Well, we have to go further back in time to August 2018, right? They were showing bits, you know, bits of E3 in the build-up, and Cyberpunk 2077's official Twitter made the "did you just assume their gender" joke, right? Which, you know, I think it's like not a particularly funny joke, right? I think it's like by 2018, the "did you assume their gender" joke is like really played out, right? It's like, it's so boring. It's like the attack helicopter meme. It's just like, like, how can you be asked? It's like, it's not particularly funny. But equally, it's not transphobic, and it's not malevolent. It's a probably low-paid member of CD Projekt Red that runs the Twitter, trying to make a joke for engagement and attention, and it didn't land. Now, I'll read you the report here from Polygon. On its face, this reply may not seem like a big deal to some of the audience, but the "did you just assume my gender" meme has been thrown around for years. A dog whistle designed to paint trans folk as overly aggressive, anal, and shrill about wanting their gender expression to be respected. It started out in places like 4chan and among anti-SJW crowds, but now can be found all over the internet. Now, again, what this actually doesn't tell you, because why would you? It was actually from a clip. It was actually from a clip of somebody saying, you know, "did you just assume I believe it was, "did you just assume my gender?" And it was somebody being really aggressive, you know, because somebody accidentally used the wrong pronouns. That was then taken, turned into a meme, and spread on the internet like memes usually are. Now, yeah, I agree. I think there are people that probably use this meme and use this joke, and they're bad faith actors, and they are doing it to be hurtful to people, non-binary people, trans people, and I don't think that's cool, and I don't tolerate that, and I don't accept that. But to the average person, and certainly within this context, I look at that meme, and here's what it means to me, and you guys can tell me if I'm crazy. When I see that meme, I don't take it as an insult about trans people or anything like that. I see it as a commentary on the times in which we live, where one slight slip of the tongue, one error, can result in this absolutely outrage, a burst of outrage from nowhere, that actually we must all start to be more intuitive and thoughtful about every little piece of language we use in our day-to-day. That's what the joke says to me, and that's how I've always interpreted the joke, right? So I don't look at it as if to say people who want their gender pronouns respected are bad. It's that, anyone who uses a word like guys could be in the crossfire and called a bigot and a transphobe for using everyday throwaway language. And in that sense, I think the joke actually has some merit, because it's almost like on a sort of pre-conscious level, what the joke is really sort of saying is, like, let's be more calm about this stuff. Like, not everyone is evil. Not everyone has bad intentions. But anyway, that's me. I think about these things. Most people don't, or they themselves act in bad faith and want to give the most uncharitable reading of any joke or any word, any sentence you use. So anyway, this article, talks about, the usual stuff. Why jokes like this matter. The internet's terrible. Everyone's an arsehole. Everyone's a cunt. Here's Sonic doing the attack helicopter meme and check your privilege in 2016. I mean, you have to understand as well the emergence of the culture, the subculture that would go on to be called SJW at that time was a very new thing. And to most people, it was absolutely absurd. And I think there's this interesting contradiction that goes on when you talk to people about this, right? The people who say, oh, you're using SJW, and ironically, they all say, well, those videos of like someone with blue hair having a meltdown on a college campus, that doesn't represent what the social justice movement is about. And it's low-hanging fruit, and all the chuds and the grifters that use those videos for cheap laughs and views are bad people, because you're taking an extreme example and using it to color the entirety of people. Well, if that's true, and I agree that it is, then why isn't it? Why can we not mock those people? You yourself agree they're outliers. So surely mocking those people is fair game, right? We should all be mocking them so we can get back to having intelligent, rational people drive the conversation. But of course, no. What happens is people plant their flag and get tribal about it. And they say, even though that person is an extreme example, they're an extreme example of my tribe, my group, my beliefs, and therefore I must defend them. And anyone who attacks them or mocks them or ridicules them, they're not just mocking and ridiculing their behavior, they're mocking and ridiculing who they are at the core of their being. It's like, you can't have it both ways. Either these people are outliers worthy of ridicule, or they are actually a true representative of a large amount of people within that group, and therefore we have to sort of think about whether or not we can ridicule them, because it's not, it's not very nice. I don't think anyone should be above ridicule, but certainly a lot of people make the argument, actually, that, so, ridicule isn't very nice. But anyway, this is what sparked it all off. Once this article went live, CD Projekt Red had a big target on their back, specifically for the Cyberpunk team and the Cyberpunk project. And you can see here they had to issue an apology, and there it is. Sorry to all those offended by one of the responses sent out from our account earlier. Harming anyone was never our intention. And I always say this. One thing I have realized is if something is absurd, if an idea is absurd and provably absurd, and you can make a concession, you can make a concession with somebody that's pushing that absurd idea on the belief that you will be able to come together and sort of find some peaceful resolution to any conflict you have and get along. What you'll quickly realize is they're not interested in that. It's on to the next absurd idea and the next absurd idea. So you have to absolutely hold your corner. And I've said this, words are not, by definition, harm. They are not harm. Words can be unpleasant. Words can be hurtful emotionally. Words can even be used, as we've seen, to encourage very unacceptable behavior. But words themselves will never harm you. And that is a lesson my generation was drilled into you as a child. And so when you end up sort of like this, Cyberpunk here have sort of fed into this idea that throwaway joke that barely anyone would have saw if Polygon hadn't amplified it. Another little thing to think about there. If those words are so harmful, how much harm is Polygon doing by taking a deleted tweet and sharing it with a much bigger audience than would have seen it originally? You've now drawn attention to the harm, so you yourself, by your definition and your rules, have spread harm. It's weird. It's weird. They never hold themselves accountable for that. But anyway, Cyberpunk essentially bent the knee and found out very quickly it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to make any difference moving forward. You're not allowed to redeem yourself. You're not allowed to apologize. You do one thing once. You fuck up one time. And the bad faith actors, especially journalists who control these huge mouthpieces, they make you that forever. It's a practice that used to be called back in the day monstering. I don't know if they still use that term. But that's what journalists do to you. You will always be the monster. Your worst moment is amplified to be a caricature of who you supposedly are, and it is foisted upon the public. Anyway. Polygon were on high alert and watching anything they did, and then this issue came up, which is they had a in-game advertisement that I'm just going to show you here that uses a transgender model in the advertisement. And you can see it's using the phrase mix it up, which obviously is a double entendre and play on words about the blurring of gender lines in the future. You can also see this is a svelte, attractive woman, also with a penis bulge visible through her outfit. So there can be no doubt about what this ad is saying and the context of what's going on there. Now, because of the previous tweet and the fact everyone was on high alert, CD Projekt Red have already been labeled transphobic. And if the journalists label you something, that is what you are. That's what you always are forever, right? So, now, I'm not a massive Cyberpunk fan. I've read, the important texts from it. I was a big William Burroughs fan. I think William Burroughs is one of the kind of forgotten forefathers of the cyberpunk scene, kind of with his ideas. Obviously, William Gibson, read some of his stuff. I don't consider it to be like high literature. Oh, Burroughs is high literature. He's one of the greatest writers who ever lived. But I don't consider a lot of the cyberpunk genre to be like particularly like high art, high literature, whatever, right? But I'll just add a few things of my observations about what's core at the sort of essence of what cyberpunk is. And so first of all, one of the main recurring themes in cyberpunk is that there is not, is corporate greed. Large corporations have took over. Corporations essentially control everything. Governments, but like they control your housing. They know everything you do. They tailor advertising specifically for you. Nothing is sacred to the corporation. Nothing is sacred to the corporation. And so obviously you would get commercials that would take something that is deeply personal, like gender identity, sexuality, and you would use it flippantly and in a shocking fashion to sell products. That's what's shocking about that picture. Not that it is a transgender person as the model, that their trans status is so flippantly thrown away out there that it's just another commodity that a corporation can use to make money. That is what is meant to be the shocking part of that. That it is ultimately a corporation essentially dehumanizing a core component of human identity and flippantly using it to sell products against. So that is very in line with the cyberpunk ideal as far as I can tell and in my experience. I'll also add that the cyberpunk genre, there's a lot of content within it that's about, it's all about sex. It's a very sexualized environment. The body, first of all, we're talking about transhumanism essentially in a lot of cyberpunk work. The body is just another asset you own. It can be modified. It can be changed. You can completely not have one. You can download your consciousness into computers and exist in a completely ephemeral digital form. You can, like anywhere you go, you are going to see people, prostitution, taken to unbelievable extremes, organ transplant. The body is just that. It is just a product. It is just a commodity. And so when you see something like that, I mean, again, it's a very sexualized advert, a very sexualized commercial. And so as a result of that, yeah, I mean, you would use a phrase like mix it up. You would show a bulge in someone's pants. I mean, that by modern advertising standards might seem graphic, but actually, think about some of the things that we do see in advertising. Think about how sexualized some advertising of products has been in the past. I mean, in the 80s especially, that Baywatch era, early 90s, people, sex sells. And so cyberpunk is an environment where corporations will do anything to make money. Nothing is sacred. And so the human sexual experience isn't sacred by definition. So I actually think that's a really clever piece of artwork. I actually think that's right at home and embodies exactly what cyberpunk is about. They bring up, of course, the tweet and the reply. They bring up the artwork, and then they went and they interviewed the woman that created that piece of work, and they said, "Why did you use a trans model in that advertisement?" And she said, "Personally, for me, this person is sexy. I like how this person looks. However, this model is used, their beautiful body is used for corporate reasons. They are displayed there just as a thing, and that's the terrible part of it." The artist, Rehash, said that the world of cyberpunk includes many people who are gender non-conforming, some of whom enjoy showing off their bodies in public. They are a demographic group with significant purchasing power, and so mega corporations use their likeness to sell soft drinks. It's supposed to be a play on the same sort of hypersexualized advertising modern companies use to sell products today, just brought in line with the kind of future CD Projekt wants to portray. In the year 2017, 2077 especially, with how much body modifications are available, I think people just mix and match however they want, however they feel. And even society is more open to different kinds of relationships. So, for me, that is an entirely positive thing, right? I think, I don't know. I've listened to games journalists. I've listened to my friends, my colleagues. I am one of these people. You know, we talk about wanting a more inclusive, a more diverse landscape where people are more accepting. So, you know, like, you have to understand, right? I'll talk about it from my own experience. So excuse me if this takes us off on a tangent. But for years, you know, I never sort of said, like, oh, I'm a bisexual. And I'll explain why. I mean, first of all, I've always been very consciously aware, like, I don't want to belong in clubs and cliques. And, you know, when I was at university, you know, there was the LGB community, and, you know, you would just be pigeonholed immediately, and, like, they would be your friends, and that's just how you had to live on campus. But for me, you know, the main thing is I grew up at a time where there was a lot of stigma. In fact, there was more stigma aimed at bisexual people than there were at gay people. And I know because I sat there awkwardly around people that aren't aware of my sexuality. And they have, you know, these are the type of people who brag about, you know, oh yeah, bashing the gays or whatever, you know, macho men who probably are closeted homosexuals, because I think only somebody that has some sort of issue with their own sexuality would have an issue with somebody else's. But topic for another time, maybe. And you know, they've said to me completely unironically, bis are worse than gays because AIDS kills gays, and it would only kill gays, but bis brought it over to straight people. And that was the attitude in the 80s and the 90s. And I grew up sort of around that. And it was still prevalent in the noughties. And that was a genuine belief espoused by lots of people. You would get these hyper-masculine dudes who would say, like, yeah, well, actually, yeah, I don't even fucking mind the gays, yeah? More women for us, right, yeah? But them boys, them dirty boys, they fuck anything, don't they, you know? And so there was actually, you know, at the time I was growing up, way more stigma aimed at bisexual people. Now, as we've kind of evolved, I'll say, I think we're in a place now where actually people don't bat an eyelid about, you know, your sexuality anymore. It's just so passé. It was always stupid to care how people want to bump uglies. And also as well, I remember having an argument with someone. I was trying to explain that sexuality isn't just about sex. Morons don't understand that it's also about love. It's about what relationship you can be in, right? You don't just fuck people. There's this. That's one of the kind of last stigmas. That's one of the last misconceptions about gay sexuality that really probably needs to be challenged a little bit, is that people think like gay people don't have like long-lasting relationships, couldn't be in a non-sexual loving relationship. It's just, you know, so people have literally said that to me. Yeah, sexuality is all about sex. What else is it about? It's in the word, isn't it? It's in the word. So it's like, okay, you can't think, do straight people, they're the only people that can fall into loving relationships, right? Yeah, but it's all about sex, isn't it? Like, it's ridiculous. People are idiots. But anyway, so the next frontier that we're pushing back and fighting against is the trans issue. And I don't know where we're going with it all, because as I've said, I think there are some unique issues and unique problems that face trans people, and also face a society that is looking to be as inclusive as possible. And I don't know how we overcome them. I don't know if we're evolved enough to even really find a way to do it. But the one thing I do know, and I know this because I'm a media student and very, very clever, obviously, is that representation absolutely matters. This isn't a debate. This isn't a discussion. It is a fact. It is a fact that when black people came to Britain, it was they were essentially pigeonholed. When we had the high levels of immigration, they were essentially pigeonholed into West Indian people, for example. They were pigeonholed into a number of jobs, and they were very happy to have them and create new lives in Britain. But then there was this inherent racism within society when we hit the recession, and people were people were saying, now we want those jobs back. And it was super important to see upwardly mobile black people in the 60s and 70s. You can go and talk to any, black person from Britain my age about people who inspired them. They gave them the belief that, we could go and do these things. We could be politicians. We could be business owners. It's important. If you don't see somebody who's like you doing something, it is very hard for you to conceptualize that maybe you could do it. And this is a basic human phenomenon. And we know that it's true. And there's loads of scientific and psychological and psychiatric and sociological data on this. So I think, to tie all this together, I think actually what is inclusive and what is helpful to kind of breaking down prejudices towards trans people is that they are included in things like video games and media. And here's a commercial that just so happens to have a trans person in it, and it's not a big deal. That to me seems to be the kind of normalization that we're aiming for. But here, because Polygon already had a bee in their bonnet about a joke, from a year ago, the games journalists weren't going to let CD Projekt Red off the hook with this one, and even put an artist who's done absolutely nothing wrong. I mean, the idea that video games journalists are going to police artwork now, who the fuck are you guys? You put a woman who didn't want to be in the spotlight, had no reason to be in the spotlight. You put her through a very uncomfortable public-facing process of having to justify what I think is a very well done, very intelligent piece of artwork. Such are the times. Anyway, while this furor was kind of bubbling on, CD Projekt Red sent their PR guys out, and they wanted to make it abundantly clear. There's an article here in Gama Sutra saying that they're working on transgender character options. And you can see this comes a week after they were grappling with a controversy. Imagine it. Imagine that being controversial. The comment came during a long conversation with the Quest director, Mateus, I can never pronounce this guy's name, Thomas Kiewicz, that took place after developers and players expressed anger and frustration online over the in-game ad. According to him, CD Projekt Red is hoping that when the character creator is finished, players will be able to customize their physical traits and voice to better match the gender they'd like to express. The company has previously shied away from confirming any details of its character creation system, stating at E3 presentations this year and last that it's a work in progress. And you can see they do like a little mini interview here, and I'll just read you what he says. It's a very sensitive and important subject, I believe. We put a lot of thought into this. One of the things we want to do in the final game, which we couldn't show in the demo at E3 yet, is to give players as many options of customization in the beginning of the game as we can. For example, we want to do this thing where as you create your character, after you choose the body type, you can, for example, use physical traits as you build your face that could be assigned to a man or a woman. Or non-binary, Gama Sutra chips in. Yes, or non-binary. The idea is to mix all of those up. That's a direct use of the phraseology in that ad, I'm sure, quite purposefully, to give them to the players as they would like to build it. Same goes for the voice. We wanted to separate this out so the players can choose it freely. This is something we are still working on. It's not as easy as it sounds. So, this to me is, first of all, great sentiment. Why character creations in a game, in a video game, don't do this more often is absolutely beyond me. I find it mind-blowing. I find it staggering that, like, I can, like, take a game, like, say, for a fucking MMO, go into the character creation, and what, I can't be, like, a huge dude with a woman's voice, or, you know, like, just weird things. And it's like, it's not ever the type of thing I would complain about, but I also equally think, why would you gate off certain options? You know, why would you do that? You don't have to do that. I'm sure it's like 1 or 2 lines of code just to allow, you know, 1 or 2 lines of code just to allow. And yeah, exactly. Saints Row 3, great example. It's not like these things haven't been done before. Now, you'll notice as well that the grave unfortunate thing is we've arrived at our first broken promise, haven't we, from Cyberpunk? Because we know now that the game's been released. The supposed incredible tools that we were going to have where we could build any type of person we wanted and, you know, non-binary people, bionic people, different body types. We know that doesn't exist. We know that doesn't exist. And in that sense, they've ultimately failed, and they've ultimately failed on one of their very early campaign promises, and on a topic which, as I've said, you know, I know a lot of my audience, members of my audience, have disagreed with me fervently about this in the past. I'm not saying it's anything I complain about. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter. I think representation is hugely important, and you've already been hit over the head for this unfairly, right? Because it's games journalists. But why not nail this? Like, why not get this right? When the options that we got, I mean, you know, we were told, customize your genitals, and everyone's like mind is blown by that, even though, like, there were better knob sliders in the Conan game. There were better knob sliders in that game Scum, where knob size seems to be directly linked to intelligence. The bigger your dick, the dumber you are, apparently, in that game. You know, at least, while I don't agree with that, at least they've put, like, some sort of intelligent thought into what a genital customization process would look like. CDPR, despite this was over a year before the game came out, they didn't even stick the landing on this topic, which they've seen was of grave importance to the people that were going to be giving them coverage of the game. And when you go in, there are 3 penises, there is 1 vagina, there is one archetypal male body type, 1 archetypal female body type. And if you choose the male-sounding voice, regardless of the body type, that is hard-coded to be the gender and the pronouns people will use in the game. They don't even give you just a pronoun selection button. It's like, guys, like, I mean, this is it. You can ignore the politics of it all and disagree with my premise that about the importance of representation in a game and our ability to create digital avatars of ourselves in digital mediums. You can forget it. You know, you can ignore all that if you want. You can say I'm crazy or I'm going soft in my old age. But let's just look at it this way: from a consumer point of view, it's a broken promise, isn't it? I mean, it's woefully inadequate for you know, they did the bare minimum they had to do to essentially give, like, plausible deniability. Yeah, look, there's multiple options. Yeah, 2 is technically multiple, isn't it? Like, perfect. Anyway, despite the fact that they went and did an interview and tried to fix it and said, look, we're going to do transgender options, no. Not enough, of course. Is this going to open? Or is this... Let's try it again. Okay. Very quickly, it was reported that the game was going to be boycotted over transphobic stereotypes. So understand, this is December, just before the game is about to be released, and people were saying, like, oh, we should totally boycott this game. And it's like, At this point, you don't. They've done everything they can to kind of show that they are sensitive to the topic. I'll just read some of the paragraphs from this article. Cyberpunk 2077 is wild to me because they used a trans woman's body to generate controversy. They weren't doing it to generate controversy, by the way. I mean, it's so disingenuous to say that piece of artwork, which they didn't publicize or anything like that, it was just in a game and a journalist noticed it and they blew it up and they publicized it. But anyway, they used a trans woman's body to generate controversy, to bring attention to the game, and then defended it by saying that the corporations in Cyberpunk co-opt gender non-conformity to sell products. You know, literally the thing CDPR did. Which, again, you've missed the point, because it's in the game. It wasn't a CD Projekt Red commercial in the real world. It was a Cyberpunk 2077 commercial in the fucking game. So... Anyway, there was this big talk that maybe we should boycott it. Now, there was no doubt in my mind that it was going to be that it was going to be one of the biggest selling games anyway of all time. But Polygon decided, right, okay, it's December. Let's just retread that article that we wrote before. Here it is. It sucks, they said, that Cyberpunk 2077's Edgelord marketing worked so well. Now, understand, guys, this is just a beautiful example of how broken games journalism is, right? So, this was a piece of artwork in a game that CD Projekt Red didn't bring any specific attention to. It was just there in some screenshots of the game. Polygon saw it. Polygon blew it up, made a mountain out of what wasn't even really a molehill. They went after CD Projekt Red. They went after the artist. They labeled them transphobic, citing completely unrelated tweets, as if they were somehow connected to the design choice of the game. A throwaway now deleted tweet from 2018. And then they turn around and go, man, it sucks that the marketing's worked so well. You marketed the game for them the minute you chose to create a fictitious controversy. Once again, though, the games journalists will absolve themselves of any responsibility, right? If something is so bad and so dangerous, you can ignore it, guys. No one's stopping you. But the games industry, they need to double dip. The only thing keeping them alive is the hate clicks. That they are a broken, busted, failing media format. It's a failing industry as a whole. They hold close to zero influence over actual consumers. You know, as evidenced by the fact that that despite the game actually not being shown to people ahead of time because of embargoes. We'll get to that in a moment. It was still one of the best-selling games of the year. All your attempts to shoot it down, all your attempts to organize boycotts, all of that, right, didn't work. It didn't work because no one listens to you, right? So, yep, Edgelord, they basically completely regurgitate the article. They bring up Good Old Games, which is owned by the CDPR parent company. They made, you may remember, they made a joke, right? That used like a trans positive hashtag, right? Which again, the person that made that tweet, which it was a throwaway joke, wasn't transphobic at all. It just happened to use a hashtag that they said is sacred and you're not allowed to use it. They got fired because of the backlash from the journalists. And then also, they took a screenshot, I believe, from Postal 3. It was one of the Postals. And it said, games journalism, dead by suicide. Do you see now, by the way, guys, what's that got to do with trans rights? Absolutely nothing. But you see, they aren't clever enough to hide their true motivations, games journalists, because they're abject failures. So basically, they've revealed there what we all know. It's the mocking and ridiculing of them. That's what they hate. That's why they'll weaponize their platforms against you over and over and over again. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. That's all that was getting called out in 2014. And then they created a fantastical story where somehow a hashtag was actually a hierarchical harassment movement and hate campaign aimed exclusively at women and setting feminism back. And then they were funded by Russia and white supremacists, and they elected Trump to enact Gamergate policies in his administration. You know, it's a nonsensical fabrication that the only substantive evidence that they can cite for that nonsensical narrative is that in a book Steve Bannon said there are a lot of angry losers farming World of Warcraft gold that we can put to work. That one line is how journalists say Gamergate was everything. Gamergate was how Trump got elected. The gamers, that huge voting bloc. Most gamers are completely politically apathetic and jaded, by the way. Just so you know. Anyway. So they rehashed the article. Read this. The Mix It Up poster is so brazenly exploitative of trans people, conjuring up very transphobic images and ideas that indelibly link trans people to the contents of their underwear. Images that are responsible for real-world harm to trans people. This is such a screeching, hysterical paragraph that it's hard to believe it's real. But at this point, it's not even the most ridiculous thing I've ever read in games journalism. You know, remember Tucker Carlson, Division 2, all of that. So what they're now saying, you see, because they have to keep raising the ante, they're now saying that a piece of artwork is actually causing people to hurt trans people in real life. Apropos of nothing, zero evidence, because obviously it's not true and nothing of the sort happened, but also completely avoiding the fact that art in a video game that is to world build is not the same as art in real life, right? Now, we can get into the philosophical arguments about the differences, but let's just shelve that. That's a long one. Let's just talk about the reality of it. You've heard the artist's statement. You understand the core concept of the art. I've explained why I think it's both clever and also in a subversive way, also inclusive. This person writing this article is either an idiot or a liar or both. Given they're a games journalist, let's go with option 3. They have decided to completely misrepresent, maybe because they genuinely don't understand the art, what the art actually stands for to you, in a bid to try and rile up an audience that reads their articles to be riled up and to set them on CD Projekt Red with this complete lie, this complete mythology. Just like they did with Kingdom Come Deliverance. A video still on my YouTube channel. You know, we did a whole episode of the Richard Lewis Show about it, where they literally tried to portray the development team as racist for simply wanting to make a historically accurate medieval simulator. And the things they said were just abhorrent and all easily proven as lies, you know. They even turned the phrase historically accurate. They said that's a racist dog whistle. You know, it's like, guys, like, I understand times are hard and you are desperate to keep a job, but this is not what you should be trafficking in. You should be ashamed. Anyway, more rehashing. Then, this is just brilliant. They've written about 2,000 words, maybe more, about how the game is definitely transphobic, definitely harmful to trans people, definitely bigoted, definitely aimed at edgelords, and then look at this. Again, no one knows how well any of these controversial themes will be tackled in Cyberpunk 2077 itself. But don't worry, guys, because that's an entirely different issue, one to be dissected upon the game's release. The artwork is from the game. It's in the game. That's what you're talking about. The much bigger issue is that Cyberpunk 2077 has demonstrated that this new form of populist video game marketing can not only be successful, but it can lead fans to form unbreakable bonds with a game they haven't even played yet. Would it have been so successful with CDPR not already equipped with such a uniquely fervent fan base? Or if Cyberpunk 2077 did not have the dual playgrounds of a future setting in a dystopian world? I'm not sure. I'll answer that question for you. Why were people logic to CDPR? By the way, loyal rather to CDPR. First, I'll tell you why. They made one of the greatest games of all time in The Witcher 3, arguably the greatest game of all time. They released 2 DLCs for it that were way beyond value for money, as well as multiple updates and free content that they continually added to the game. And they did it intuitively while saying all the while, communicating with their consumers and saying, listen, we're going to do this, we'll never do this, there'll never be microtransactions, we're never going to do this. They followed that up with the Gwent game. You know, I think that's low-key one of the best competitive card games out there right now. It's a shame it's not played by more people. I think it's wonderful. They released Thronebreaker. That game was one of the best games I played on the year it was released. Great storyline. Nice little puzzle game. When you build up that trust, yes, people become loyal to you. Now, the karma is they've sold all that down the river. And I'll tell you, while on the early release of the game, I did see some gamers who were like, no, I mean, why are you saying the bad things about CDPR? I don't see many of them now, especially the console gamers. CDPR have destroyed their reputation, as I'll show you. CDPR are getting stick from the gamers. So the idea that the gamers are loyal, they've got their Bannon-esque army, and no, none of that's true. When you boil down to it, when you distill it down to its essence, gamers, gamers with an asterisk where the A should be, they're customers. And customers don't like being screwed over. There's no amount of loyalty that will get people to tolerate you essentially giving them something that they paid for and it not being what they wanted, not being what they expected. That's all there is to it. So anyway, that was Polygon's latest attempt. Now, I want to also just remind you, CD Projekt Red, right? I've heard so many times, right, from like games journalists and people who talk about gaming culture and lefty YouTubers and that sort of thing, that actually CD Projekt Red are like secretly like Gamergate, right? They're Edgelord, as you saw there. The media never cover the other side of the equation. As I said, there has never been a more intelligent and succinct quote about what the media does, and that is that if you don't read the news, if you don't engage with the media, you're uninformed. If you do read the news, you're misinformed. They're your two choices, right? It's all rigged. It's all a fucking game, right? So what journalists are primarily concerned with now is just narrative building, not factual reporting, not giving you information you need to know. They instead are looking to simply change your mind at every turn. Now, this used to be the sole preserve of the op-ed, of the opinion piece. It's called an op-ed because it's opposite the editorials page. That's where that phrase comes from in the newspapers traditionally. You always knew when you were reading an opinion, but slowly and surely over the years and on TV, everyone's adopted the Fox News model, which was, you know, I'm just going to insert my opinion in this completely biased representation of the news. There is no one who just wants to give it to you straight now. No one wants to give you the facts. And again, it's all downstream, isn't it? So games journalism, they will not tell you things that they think might cause you to challenge the narrative they've spent years building. So, by way of a for instance, you probably didn't know, right, that Cyberpunk 2077, back in June, they delayed an event because they wanted to show support for the Black Lives Matter movement. And this was when we were having the protests around the death of George Floyd. And you won't find this anywhere. But they made a point of sort of essentially, you know, we're delaying one of our big reveal events, which was an essential component of their pre-Christmas release marketing. And you can see here, I'll read you the statement. We decided to move Night City Wire to the 25th, which was like 2-3 weeks down the road at the time. We still look forward to sharing new information about Cyberpunk 2077, but more important discussions are happening right now, and we want them to be heard. We wholeheartedly stand against racism, intolerance, and violence. Black Lives Matter. Right? Now, that to me is not saccharine, not fake, not contrived. You know, I did see a lot of corporations and a lot of companies get involved at this time, you know, doing things that really blew my mind. You know, companies that use child slaves in Africa in mines to get minerals that die in mine collapses, and they're saying Black Lives Matter. And what they mean is Black American consumers' lives matter, not Black lives. And it made me sick, and I did a video about that. But this, to me, seems a perfectly reasonable, believable, you know, show of solidarity about a very important issue. And they moved their event, and they didn't want any plaudits for it. And they didn't just move it by a day, they moved it a significant period of time. And as I said, this was an essential component of their marketing. You know, lots of hype around the game. People even that rabid fan base that Polygon keep talking about, there were people who criticized them for this, going, we don't care about American politics. Why must American politics be right? You're not even an American company, right? They got shit for it, if you can believe that. Such is the internet. But you don't read about this in Polygon. You don't read about this in Polygon. Nor will it buy them any credit at all. Wired accused them of being racist. Accused the company of being racist. Here's why. Let me just pop that in for you. This was Orientalism, Cyberpunk 2077, and Yellow Peril in Science Fiction. And the central premise of this article is that what they've done is basically used a bunch of like Chinese stereotypes and Japanese corporations being bad stereotypes. I'll just read you some of this, and you know. You'll probably get to see how ridiculous this is. The themes of class and social inequality often become caught up in fixating upon a foreign, racialized other whose sudden capitalist dominance is both uncanny and extra terrifying. Rivera that's the person that quote's attributed to, noted how the 1982 murder of Vincent Chin in Detroit, Michigan, was a result of fears that Japan's then booming economy meant that country would soon take over American industries such as auto and real estate. Chin, a Chinese man, was murdered by two disgruntled white male auto workers who assumed he was Japanese. He added, techno-oriental fears are mapped as easily upon Japanese people as the Japanese cars, mass reproducible, intrusive, and overwhelming the more human white man. This article is staggeringly insane. I mean, when you start linking a 1982 hate crime, the motivations for which is the death of the automotive industry in Detroit, where it used to be the heartland of it, to Cyberpunk having Asian representation in their game. I'm a smart guy, but to try and make these things mesh, it just reeks of somebody that wants to talk about something else, but uses the popular hot topic of the time to talk about that thing by tenuously linking it to the thing everyone else is talking about. So, it talks about triads, Yakuza representation, the Tiger Claw gang in Cyberpunk 2077. It's crazy. It's a wild article. I will not kill your brain cells by reading it all. Rock, Paper, Shotgun, the publication that published an article saying RimWorld was transphobic because it used character descriptions written by trans writers, and that it was homophobic because it used code that they made up and never existed in the game. They wanted to weigh in, and you can imagine what their opinion is, and that is that Cyberpunk 2077, their demo has weak gunplay and unimaginative stereotypes. What could those stereotypes be, do you think? Well, let me just, I'm going to quickly bring it up. I didn't make a note of where it was in the article. Right. So, there's a gang called the Animals. Right? You know that. And so here it is. The demo resets to before we infiltrated the compound. Now the person playing is controlling a strong solo character type who immediately demonstrates this by tearing two doors open with her cyber arms. We're discovered soon after as a stealth attack goes awry. We punch that man to the floor, then stab another animal, that is the name of the gang member, the animal, many times with a broken bottle as they try to run away from us. It's horrible. The stabbing causes my V to level up, and the person playing the demo opens up a menu with 12 options for skill points, though we don't get a good look at them. Once the menu's closed, a man comes at us with superhuman speed, but we grab hold of him and advance on a turret as it riddles his body with bullets. Then, because again we're very strong, we rip the turret off its base and turn it on the animals. At this point, I feel increasingly uncomfortable that we're shooting at predominantly black people labeled as animals. Like, I don't know what to tell you. This is a you problem. That is very much a you problem. Right? If you're tying that together in your mind, you might have some stuff to work out, mate. Not me, because I would never have made that connection. So, they then go on to talk about the Voodoo Boys, another gang. This one being also predominantly black with that kind of voodoo aesthetic. And it said, last year's Gamescom demo drew criticism for its clumsy and inauthentic presentation of a Latino character, and I'm not convinced the Voodoo Boys are a step in the right direction. At one point, the player character mockingly says, "And who are dem?" in response to Placide's pronunciation. I asked the developer if he was concerned they weren't treating certain cultures with enough respect. It then goes on to say, he tells us the Voodoo Boys are going to turn on us the moment we've done their dirty work. The violent black thugs betray us as the corporate white man said they would. If CD Projekt Red are trying to subvert expectations, if the punchline is, but sometimes the thugs are really thugs, it is not one that lands. Again, I just think you're bringing your baggage to this game. Like, I think this says way more about you as an individual than it says about the game itself. And so, while he's criticizing the game for being racist, Wired are criticizing the game for being racist, even though, as we know, they supported Black Lives Matter. Let me just show you the writer behind, the gangs, certainly the creator of the Voodoo Boys. Here he is. You might be able to spot a slight problem immediately with the idea this is a racist. I'll see if you can put it together yourself. So, he actually addressed the controversy, the manufactured controversy I had, on Reddit, because he is an individual that I believe the kids would call based, and he likes to interact with people, and certainly has said his piece about all of this. I'm just going to see, because this is new Reddit, actually. So, yeah, it won't show the reply in the correct way. I'll just go to making it old Reddit, or as I call it, working Reddit. So, this should be better now. Yeah, right. So, the comments section under the Rock, Paper, Shotgun hit piece had some assholes, one very vocal one, repeatedly telling everyone that Mike Pondsmith was involved at some point, but definitely not involved anymore because he'd never sign off on something as racist as a gang called Animals. CD Projekt Red deviated from the 2020 canon horribly and inexcusably in their portrayal of the Voodoo Boys. 3, the whole thing just sets off alarm bells suggesting that the game is profoundly inauthentic and CDPR didn't really get Cyberpunk. I wish I could throw this in their faces. So Mike Pondsmith turns up in the subreddit and goes through it point by point. 1, if I wasn't heavily involved, I would be able to get more done. As it is, I barely have a life. So myth 1, that Mike Pondsmith, as a black writer, wasn't involved in Cyberpunk, shut down, dismissed. These are his creations. These are his ideas. And yeah, and worth also pointing out, the Animals are not not exclusively black, by the way. There's multiple ethnicities in that gang in the game. 2, as for the Animals, the whole freaking point is that they think of themselves as powerful, dangerous, wild animals. You'd have thought the lady named Sasquatch would have given them a clue. 3, the original Voodoo Boys were a scathing commentary on cultural appropriation. I love the idea that real practitioners of voodoo moved in and took back their turf. And they even got the Creole right. 4, who the fuck do you think you are to tell me whether or not my creation was done right or not? So, if you ever want to show your appreciation to a writer in video games, Mike Pondsmith is the guy. Because trust me, it's very hard when these fucking nutcases in the media want to tokenize everyone. It's very hard because these, effete white liberals will probably say, oh, Mike Pondsmith's just appealing to his edgelord. He's got internal racism. That's what they always do. Anytime someone deviates from them, from one of the groups that they want to be oppressed on behalf of. As I said, that rock, paper, shotgun article, if I was the editor and that come across my desk, I would have definitely said to the journalist, I think this says you're making those connections in your mind rather than the game. And that's worrying to me, and you should probably take that out and think about why you're doing that. So, they couldn't run away from the racism. So, the game's transphobic. The game is racist. And the media now, they've been turned into looking like idiots at each turn because obviously the game isn't transphobic. The game isn't racist. The lies about Mike Pondsmith not being involved are exactly that. They're lies. And so we have to sit and wait. And because of all of that negative coverage, trust me, they are sitting and waiting and willing this game to fail. And what I find just bitterly disappointing about this whole escapade is CD Projekt Red was so stupid, so greedy. They actually fell into the trap of rushing out the game, giving a release date they couldn't possibly make, especially during the pandemic. Then, when they had the out and they could have delayed it, they delayed it once, they delayed it twice, they delayed it thrice. Still pushed for that Christmas release to maximize profit. And unfortunately, the game is at least a year away from being finished. They should have said, COVID's changed everything. I know everyone is sad, but you can only release a game once, and we want to do it right. That's all they had to do. But greed drove that conversation and drove that decision. And they played right into the hands of gaming journalists that were just sat there, please fuck up, please, please. They would have, and they actually enabled the journalists to turn nonsensical reporting into valid factual criticism, which we'll get into now. So, the game delays led to, and the very apparent and obvious fact the game wasn't going to be released in a fit state led to crunch. Now, I've talked a lot about crunch in my videos. As some of you will know, regular viewers, I'm a secret lefty, even though I get called everything from fucking alt-right, fascist, Nazi, conservative by some of my kinder detractors. Trump supporter, I've heard it all. I'm a former member of the Socialist Workers' Party and former trade union representative. So I don't know how much more lefty you can get, but apparently I'm a bit of a lefty. So I despise corporations and I despise companies that abuse people's labor and don't treat their employees accurately. And I've before esports actually taken stands against that, fought against it, fought against unfair disciplinary practices, unfair working conditions. I've helped people get their jobs, get their money, get compensation. I've worked, for example, on, funnily enough, a gender pay gap, a real one, case for Birmingham City Council, where dinner ladies and like grave diggers and people in those lollipop ladies, people in that type of industry were being paid deliberately less than their male counterparts, in one of the rare examples of it happening, and them having to get decades worth of back pay in what is the largest single compensatory payout from any government body in Europe, and it's almost bankrupted Birmingham City Council. They've had to make loads of cutbacks as a result of it. I helped those people get their money. So, but they won't put that on my tombstone or in the obituary, right? They'll put the 6 months at Breitbart in, though. You know, that'll be on my Here lies Breitbart writer Richard Lewis, right? Anyway, so the insanity of crunch being accepted in the games industry, and I've seen people I respect, and it's very hard for self-made people, entrepreneurs, autodidacts, you know, people that are like very self-motivated. You know, I'm one of them. To sort of take a backward step, they always go, "Hey, I used to put myself through 80-hour weeks. If you want to succeed, you got to put the work in." That's not what's going on with crunch. What's going on with crunch, right? Typically, when you say put the work in to succeed, climb that ladder, you know, you're almost talking about it being your choice. Crunch in the games industry is you work on a game, your employers tell you a promise we've made erroneously about the readiness of our product. We now need you to essentially engage in work beyond your paid hours and in heinous conditions to meet that promise because we don't want to have our share price collapse. So that is crunch, and it's horrible. There are horror stories. All of these companies, many of whom, by the way, at some point have condemned me. Your Activision Blizzards, your fucking, what are they called? NetherRealm Studios, right? Like, all of these people have all had heinous working practices in the past, you know? And, like, I'm a bad guy because I just say, like, you know, maybe putting your pronouns in your bio isn't the most important thing in the world. Just a thought, like, just an opinion. I might be totally wrong. You know, like, that makes me the devil. Meanwhile, we're going to work people to the point of having a nervous and physical breakdown for our corporate entities to make profit. This is ridiculous. And CD Projekt have, they're one of the, there's no getting away from it, guys. They're one of the worst offenders. They've crunched every major game release that I can think of. There was crunch when they were a small studio around the original release of The Witcher. Witcher 2, massive crunch. Remember as well, they had to release a bunch of patches with that. Witcher 2 was a nightmare. Witcher 3, loads of crunch. I mean, that was one of the first insane cases of crunch I think I'd ever sort of seen widely publicized. And then ahead of CD Projekt Red, they were telling their staff, like, you're going to have to work 6-day weeks. It's just that simple. Crunch is the unacceptable. It's the unacceptable that's been normalized in the games industry. Everyone knows it exists. Every company does it. Some worse than others. And we all just tolerate it. This is like not as bad, but you know, if you get, like, many of you are conscientious shoppers, right? You think about where the product comes from and how it's made. Like, you would feel decidedly uncomfortable by way of, for instance, owning, you know, a product if you knew, like, children had died to make it or something like that, right? You know, it's like, I don't, you know, I've got Apple products, but I don't buy Apple products anymore. I just won't do it. they're not getting my money, you know? I don't financially support Blizzard anymore because of their ties to China, when China are literally putting Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps, sterilizing their women. It's insane. Like, I'm not being complicit, and it can be very hard. Honestly, because all corporations on some level will engage in varying degrees of evil to make their money. But with CD Projekt Red here in the crunch, like, there's just no getting away from it, guys. There was something very, very wrong, and they started treating they'd even sort of publicly come out and said, we're not going to we're not going to crunch our staff. So this was where, as well, internally, they weren't even communicating effectively with their own staff about the delays. So this was when they announced in October, the game had already gone gold. They told everyone, we're not going to hit that November release date. We're going to have to push it back to December. And that was supposedly, lol, by the way, to make the game come closer to the high standard on PS5 and Xbox. fucking hell, what would it have been like without that extra month? But you can see in this report here on Game Informer, they spoke to several of the developers of the game, and they all said, listen, we didn't even know about the delay until they got an internal email, which was hours before the announcement was made on Twitter. So the staff confused, they saw an end in sight, even though, as we'll get to, I don't think they necessarily wanted the game to be released in its state. I think most staff members knew the game was actually not in a fit state. Then, despite promises that had been made, boom, here we go. We've hit the delays. Time for the 6-day weeks. Let them rain down. Polish video game developer CD Projekt Red told employees on Monday 6-day work weeks will be mandatory, leading up to the November release, which again, it got delayed, of the highly anticipated Cyberpunk 2077, reneging on an earlier promise to not force overtime on the project. You can see as well, in an interview they did with Kotaku last year, they said the company was committed to avoiding mandatory crunch, and they would allow employees to work without overtime. All of that went out the window. And I'll read you the statement, because this was an email that was distributed. Starting today, the entire development studio is in overdrive. Elaborating that this meant your typical amount of work on one day of the weekend. The extra workday would be paid as required by Polish labor laws. Many other video game studios do not pay for overtime in crunch. I take it upon myself to receive the full backlash for this decision. I know this is in direct opposition to what we've said about crunch. It's also in direct opposition to what I personally grew to believe a while back, that crunch should never be the answer, he said, having crunched on every major release from the studio. But we've extended all of the possible means of navigating this situation. Except just delaying the game until it's ready. Right? You could do that. So, crunched up the wazoo. The Verge also picked up the story. That was Jason Schreier, I believe, over at Bloomberg. And you can see Cyberpunk 2077 devs break the promise, will force employees to work 6 days a week. Oh, how they enjoyed writing this one up. And they even went back, took the interview, and said, if I'm a designer at CD Projekt Red, and I say, you know what, I have kids, I have a family, I'm going to work from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, and that's it, even until the very end, am I going to be okay with that? And the studio's co-founder says, yes, yes. Jason Schreier says, no matter what, yes. So you can commit to that. We've committed to that already. So you can see the type of problems and situations CD Projekt Red have got himself into here around this crunch situation. And this is what blew my mind, that even at this point in time, remember this is like, late October, early November, people were defending them and defending crunch. It's the one thing I hate about games consumers, that what they care about most of all is getting their hand on the game. It's like an unbelievably selfish view, and it's like, you should not want to support a studio that does that to its employees. Like you shouldn't want to support a studio that is willing to try and rush out a product. That means almost certainly you get an inferior product. You're the one who's getting the product. Do you want to wait a year, get a fucking nice polished game with all the features in, maybe an extra bit of content, maybe some free type of DLC or whatever, because you were a fucking pre-order and you had to wait an extra year, right? And the game's sick and it's been made in an ethical environment without anyone like collapsing at their desk? Or do you want a buggy fucking piece of shit, early, and it doesn't work, and you've got day one patches, you can barely play the game, And you're still going to have to wait that year for it to be the experience you wanted it to be anyway, by which point you've had a tepid, awful, watered-down experience, and nothing's going to reclaim that time. You know, for me personally, I'm from a time when a game was released, you couldn't, there was no internet. A game had to be finished to be released. The internet has become like a crutch to games developers because they know everyone's got it and they can ship patches on day one if they need to, or next week if they need to, and you're going to have access to it. Back before the internet, you know, I think about Super Nintendo. I mean, I go back to cassettes, Spectrum games. There's literally a game, I think, is it Jet Set Willy? Or was it Manic Miner? Jet Set Willy, I think. There was one famous Spectrum game anyway. It's impossible to complete. It was released broken with a bug in it that meant it couldn't be completed without you using a cheat. And that's just how it stayed forever. It was the stuff of legend because they couldn't literally go back and fix it. And there was no internet to download a patch. You just had a broken game. Everyone who bought that game, and it was a popular game and a popular selling game, everyone who had it just had a broken game forever, right? So, you know, that's the standard everyone should be aiming for, that your game is in a state of polish when it's released. It stands alone. It is playable. There aren't any game-breaking bugs in it. And I see so many developers today, it's like they get it as close as they can to that standard, usually using the blood, sweat, and tears of low-level employees, because another thing I left out when I was talking about crunch is often these people aren't even full-time employees. In America especially, they outsource it to contractors, because then you don't have to pay them, you know, any benefits. They're not entitled to any holiday. They can't complain. You just pay them by the hour, and you even get to underpay them. It's actually cheaper to do it. So for 6 weeks of crunch, they'll get somebody, hey, want to come work at a game studio for 6 weeks? And it's miserable, and it's wretched, and you barely make any money, but you do get to put it on your CV, right? They get you like that. So crunch is awful. What CD Projekt Red have done here is unforgivable. I can't believe people would want to support and challenge them as they were at this moment in time. Not so much when the game was released, of course. Then, just to underline my point as well about how bad CD Projekt Red were treating certain employees, certain staff, yes, it is available to me. Stop lying. Why you always lying? There we go. Let's do that again. Okay, this was a staff member that came out that worked for CDPR. I can now share that I earned $430 monthly for full-time work on facial animations on that great Game 3 in that great company that totally treats their passionately crunching employees fairly. Too soon? Okay. So this is somebody that worked on The Witcher 3. You know, you can go and if you look up the user of the account, that's what they did. $430 for full-time work, and they got crunched. So, I mean, obviously, Polish studio, etc. So there is wage disparity, but I mean, you can't have the benefits, in my opinion, of being a global company and then using economies of scale to sort of essentially stick it to your employees. And yeah, I think I heard that too. $430 is actually the Polish minimum wage. I think that's accurate. So you're doing high-skilled work for a game that made this company millions and continues to do so. And you got your work on it was, which is again high-skilled, difficult work, was valued so much they threw the bare minimum at you and crunched the ever-living shit out of you while they did it. There's no dressing up. CD Projekt Red are not good guys. Like, there's no getting away from this now. Then, let's get to the fucking best bit prior to release. So, it then came out that Project Red were doing my personal favorite, the aggressive NDA. Now, I've been covering stories about whistleblowers and about, people who have been in bad contractual situations. And they've almost always got an NDA. For those who don't know, an NDA is something called a non-disclosure agreement, not to be confused with a non-disparagement clause. A non-disparagement clause is an agreement that you will never badmouth the company even after you leave the company, usually without time limits. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, which usually says that you will not talk about anything that relates to your contract, relates to the game, relates to the particular topic at hand, any information that essentially the people who drafted the contract don't want you to reveal until a set date or at all, depending on the situation. And I got loads of stick. One of my most popular stories in 2014, the one that, funnily enough, made my career go up, then made my career go down, was obviously the idea that Reddit moderators had entered into an NDA, which is a contract, after all, with Riot Games. Now, it turns out, by the way, Reddit is just a fucking AstroTurf shithole, and way worse has gone on since, and was probably going on at the time. I'm talking mods, posting, deleting posts, criticizing companies because they're taking money from certain companies, a la what was going on over in the Epic Games subreddit. There's all sorts of shenanigans going on. It's just an AstroTurf shithole. Nothing you see on Reddit is authentic. Now, the reason I ran the story about it at the time in 2014 or whenever it was because Reddit had explicitly said it was wrong for moderators to enter into contractual agreements with entities. Slight problem. At that time, the League of Legends subreddit, in terms of traffic, was the most busy, the most popular subreddit on Reddit at the time. It didn't have as many subs as loads of the other ones, but in terms of just clicks, it was the busiest subreddit. And at that time, Reddit were actually in talks with Riot to maybe even put Reddit-style, avatars in the game, or have, some sort of, thing where you synced up your account so you got special flair on the League of Legends subreddit. They were looking at ways of basically, Riot had acknowledged that their forums were not the hub of the community that they'd hoped for. It was all on Reddit, and they were looking for ways to essentially have, a monetization pact. So when you consider that, and when you consider, we all know how fucking sinister Riot Games are, the idea of a bunch of anonymous internet janitors entering into an agreement with them and sitting in a fucking Skype group that they still lie about to this day, where they say all we ever talked about was when things were being released or when servers were down. I've seen screenshots. You're lying. So the reality is, I thought that would be a big story. I realize now, actually, it's nowhere near the worst thing that a Reddit moderator has ever done. And it's just par for the course on that shithole website that needs to be nuked from space, frankly. It's a terrible site. It does nothing good for anybody anymore, if it ever did. But anyway, NDAs are the reason I think they're sinister is because it essentially says, if you tell people the truth, whatever the truth might be, we have legal recourse to sue you. We can pursue legal remedies. So it is an intimidation tool. Because if I work on something and you do something bad to me while we're working on that thing, I don't want a piece of paper that says I can't tell people about that, or you can essentially bankrupt me. Now, what was funny at the time I wrote that story was, there were lawyers going, an NDA is nothing to worry about. And everyone went, see, lawyers say NDAs can't be aggressively used and aren't sinister. It's right, guys, Let's just assess this. I'm a journalist, someone who is obsessed with the truth, and the truth reaching as many people that it needs to. Lawyers draft NDAs for a living and are paid to do it. I wonder who we should be thinking about here. Like, holy shit. But no, because the lawyers said NDAs are good and perfectly normal and nothing to worry about. It's fine. It's acceptable. So, anyway, the journalists, anyone who wanted to review the game, got hit with these super aggressive NDAs by CDPR. And this should have been a much bigger story than what it was. This should have been an insane red flag for how bad the game was going to be. Once again, it's reported in Wired. How Cyberpunk 2077 sold a promise and rigged the system, right? And so here it is. Let me just get down here. Where was the paragraph? Fuck it. I think this is all interesting context, so I know the nut paragraph I want is coming up down here, but whatever. So it became clear last Thursday that CD Projekt Red had launched an unsealed rocket into space. Bullets aimed at thighs struck rib cages. Non-playable characters ragdolled around like reject mannequins. One player's hard-boiled protagonist stood T-posed inside a moving car, naked ass resting on the roof. Enlarged penises clipped through pants. PC player reviews on Steam described it as not the game people thought it would be, and janky 8 years of hype to launch what looks like an early access game. It was not the game of the future. Playing it on PC made me so nauseous I had to Google frame rate hotfixes. And that was just for Cyberpunk 2077's PC incarnation. On the next-gen consoles, remember they had a delay to fix this, Cyberpunk 2077 works all right, but it's a mess and a half on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Visuals blur, the frame rate stutters, NPC mouths as stiff as cave moors. Monday, CD Projekt Red issued a Dear Gamers apology for not showing you the game on base last-gen consoles before it premiered, and in consequence not allowing you to make a more informed decision about your purchase. It expects the most prominent problems for older consoles to be patched sometime in February. In the meantime, you can get a refund. Performance aside, the game as a whole is just okay. While some people do quite like it, Night City gets samey, combat's whatever, that wasn't the point. The point was the great dissonance between a build-up of expectations and reality, the feeling of broken trust. CD Projekt Red is directly responsible for the size of that gap. Years ahead of launch, CDPR offered journalists curated previews that inspired breathless leads like Metro's. Cyberpunk 2077 may be the best video game ever made, it said in 2018. A year later, cinematic teasers and short monitored gameplay sessions led some to suggest that Cyberpunk 2077 should be on top of gamers' most wanted list. In June, CD Projekt Red had reviewers stream the game from a PC that the company controlled. It's a playground rife with opportunity, wrote Eurogamer at that time. It's a game about deciding who you want to be. Now, you can see the problem here, and this is an indictment of the whole rotten business. Because, first of all, CD Projekt Red, right, if you're a games company with a game to sell, and the only way I can review your product is to play it on a computer that you control, or to look at, pre-recorded gameplay footage, and that's how we're doing our review, is it? Well, fuck you. I know straight away you're at it. You're up to no good. I had a very similar thing, actually, with Rage, if people remember that game from, was it Bethesda? I think so. I used to be a games reviewer. I used to be a games journalist. And I got invited to a press junket, and they basically had... you could sit and play the game at a PC in a room with all other journalists, and you could play it for no more than 2 hours, right? The timer started, they gave you 2 hours to get as far as you could into the game, and then they kicked you out. And that was the terms of the review. So, if you know Rage, the first 2 hours are actually pretty engaging and pretty good, or as far as you could realistically get, probably the first 4 hours. But that is a game that is empty, repetitive, boring, has no real end, one of the most disappointing endings in any story-driven game of all time. And so what they did was basically give you the most engaging, juiciest cut of the game that was really unfinished and Spartan. And so you do the review, and I remember reading reviews from journalists that went to that junket and seeing previews, I should say, seeing very positive comments about Rage and how good it was, and the animations were incredible, the way people moved and tried to dodge your bullets and stuff like this. And I turned in a review to my editor that said, I am highly suspicious because the first 2 hours were essentially the tutorial, and it was, highly dense, story-rich, lots of things happening. But once the game gets... But I didn't get to play any of the open world aspect of the game. I got to play the all-on-rails shit at the beginning. My editor at the time took that out because they didn't want negative relations with a big company like id or Bethesda or whoever the fuck we'd made the Faustian Pact with. And that's how games journalism works. That's how I know how it works. The amount of times I had to fucking give something a 6 when I thought it was a 7, because I knew if I gave it a 7, my editor would bump it up to an 8. I lost count. And I remember I publicly said this because I replied to a journalist, I can't remember which one, who said, I don't know why people make out that you're pressured to give good reviews in the game. If you're at a smaller publication, you absolutely are. And if you're at a bigger publication, I'd argue there's a different kind of pressure, but it's still very real. It's why IGN's a joke. It's why any game that gives you weeks and weeks and weeks, if not months, of early access, so you get loads and loads and loads of content, you're not turning around and giving that game a 5 if it fucking sucks at launch. Of course you're not. The agreement is there, whether it's explicit or implied. So whenever I talk about that, people go, Richard reviewed games for a small website. I also used to review games for the whole of fucking NUS. That's the National Union of Students. I used to review games for their magazine, and it was the same thing. If you gave a game a bad review, you would maybe not get the next game by that company, or you would certainly get an email asking, why? Because my reviews in everything I did, I've said it before. Back when I was a music journalist, my reviews were unreasonably bad. Like, if I thought if I thought your music was shit, I would just, it's 0 out of 10. Garbage. Snap the CD in half, So, anyway, back to this. In the meantime, the scaffolding was bending. Cyberpunk 2077 experienced 3 delays, including after January of this year, when CD Projekt Red described the game as complete and playable, and after it claimed the game had gone gold or been completed in October. In November, CDPR sent non-disclosure agreements to journalists ahead of Cyberpunk 2077's launch that forbade the inclusion of original gameplay footage in their reviews. They could share screenshots, but the only gameplay footage they could publish had to come from CD Projekt Red. Infringing obligations in the NDA could amount to around $27,000 per violation. So, to even get access to the game, to review it, You had to agree you wouldn't show your audience actual gameplay, or you agreed per infraction to be fined $27,000. And now you see the flip side of how the system's broken. Because we know which journalists have all agreed to this. We know which YouTubers agreed to it even, which influencers agreed to it. I would never agree to this. I would tell them, stick that up your fucking arse. Stick that up your fucking arse. Because it isn't a review if I have to say, I played the game and this happened. Can't show you evidence of it, though, because I might get fined. Ugh. That is just nonsense. No credible publication should agree to that. And I'm very pleased to say that while I've showed an article from Wired earlier to this, Wired make it clear they do not sign NDAs from companies they cover. It's almost as if it's an ethical concern. And here's the other kicker. Reviewers also only received the PC version of the game. The abysmal last-gen console was out of view. In a call with CDPR's board, joint CEO Adam Kaczynski admitted the company had ignored the signals about the need for additional time to refine the game on the base last-gen consoles and showed the game mostly on PC during their marketing campaign. Once reviewers received their games, often mere days ahead of the launch, they mainlined the main storyline and as many side quests as they could muster, wrote a couple of thousand words, and posted them online on December 7th, 3 days before the December 10th launch. It's, absolutely beyond unethical, and it's unethical from CDPR, and it's unethical from all the journalists that basically 4 clicks agreed to fucking sell you out as consumers. The system is broken. You have a company engaging in an anti-consumer practice. The journalists that are meant to be calling out anti-consumer practices, remember as well, all had an axe to grind. All had an axe to grind with CDPR, right? And yet, you still agreed to this, did you? You still agreed to it so you could get your grubby mitts on the game and get the clicks. Even if you were just going to write about how the game was secretly racist the whole time. Nonsense. So if you want to read the full thing, or just keep it for your own reference, because I can see some people asking, this is Wired. It's by Cecilia D'Anastasio. Remember, I know she's got things wrong. But I know she called me out after my game speech. But you don't know what the clique is like. I think overall she's a net good. And even though I did find her at a ridiculous meltdown to be embarrassing and immature. Right? I think in general her work is good. So, we've come to the fun part now. Why don't we have a look at some of these bugs?
Tell me what you looking at. I'm putting my ride on the line. Either you match it in cash, or you can forget about the fight.
With these wheels, no expense has been spared, no frill ignored. Their plush interiors decked out in all the latest tech, while you get to sit back and enjoy the ride.
So, it's a mess, guys. It's an absolute mess. There's many videos. And actually, I always mispronounce his name, because in my mind it's Croby Cat, but it's probably Crobe Cat, is it? I've never heard anyone say it. I've only ever seen it written down. Where he came out of a hiatus and did a video on it, like 45-minute video showing all the bugs and all the lies from reviewers. This will be the best game ever, guys. It'll be amazing. All of that stuff. So go check that out. It's a great video. All his stuff's great. And you'll be able to laugh at even more of these ridiculous bugs. Now, again, Cyberpunk, right? I mean, at this point, they're just fucking shadowboxing. They did apologize. I'll show you the apology for the sake of, like, completion. Here it is. Dear gamers, first of all, we would like to start by apologizing to you for not showing the game on base last-gen consoles before it premiered, and in consequence, not allowing you to make a more informed decision about your purchase. We should have paid more attention and making it play better on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Second, we will fix bugs and crashes and improve the overall experience. The first round of updates has just been released, and the next one is coming within the next 7 days. Expect more, as we will update frequently whenever new improvements are ready. After the holidays, we'll continue working. We'll release 2 large patches, starting with patch 1 in January. That will be followed by patch 2 in February. Together, these should fix the most prominent problems gamers are facing on the last-gen consoles. We will be informing you about the contents of each patch ahead of their release. They won't make the game on last gen look like it's running on a high-spec PC or an next-gen console, but it will be closer to that experience than it is now. Finally, we would always like everyone who buys our games to be satisfied with their purchase. We would appreciate it if you would give us a chance, but if you are not pleased with the game on your console and don't want to wait for updates, you can opt to refund your copy. For copies purchased digitally, please use the refund system of PSN or Xbox respectively. For boxed versions, please first try to get a refund at the store where you bought the game. Should this not be possible, contact us here and we will organize it. Starting from today, you can contact us for a week up until December 21st. Now, I just want to show you how bad. I did actually download. Right. Let me show you just quickly how bad the difference between the next gen and what was shown in trailers actually is. Here we go. Because I don't think people realize. It was absolutely ridiculous. Where is the fucking side by side? That's actually too good. Wait, hold on. I want to get the Keanu side by side. Okay. Oh, God. Some of these fucking memes are great, though. Fair play to them. Right, here we are. Like, give me a fucking break. Give me a fucking break, dude. Like, please, like. So it's bad. It's bad. I mean, even on like when it wasn't as bad as that and it was optimized, it's still, you know, not fucking great. Like, it's so it was pretty bad, the whole thing, you know. It was a tough one. And so they were definitely right to react to this. Wasn't really enough, by the way, because while they did wade in and allow people to have a refund, I'll just show you. You saw it there. It was in their official statement. Can we do this? Is this possible? Come on. Oh yeah, sorry, I fucked it up. That's why. XSplit's working loads better, by the way. Since they released a patch, it's actually like, dare I say it? Maybe I spoke too soon. All I had to do was download the latest version, 4.0. We're back. XSplit's back, baby. Yeah, all the mistakes today on things not opening, all me. All user error. So, anyway, good luck getting a Cyberpunk 2077 refund if you bought a digital PlayStation copy, right? This was after CD Projekt Red had said, right, listen, guys, you can get your refunds. It's going to be fine, but make sure you go to the store first. This is where Sony have said they're not going to refund it. They said this to a journalist. I'll bring up the tweet for you. Sony won't refund my Cyberpunk 2077 order, even after the game's developer said buyers could get refunds. The game literally crashes my PlayStation 4. That was a known thing, by the way. One of the problems on the PS4 was just blue screen all the time. Just go fuck yourself. Middle of a game, fuck yourself. Saving a game, fuck yourself. Doing nothing, fuck yourself. Idling, fuck yourself. This used to turn off all the time. Sony said, "Nah, you're not getting refunds. Wait for the updates." I'll show you the email they sent him. Thank you for contacting PlayStation. CD Projekt Red is currently working on patches and updates to fix bugs and crashes and improve overall gameplay experience for Cyberpunk 2077. There you go. Just suck a dick. Just suck a dick. And keep your broken game that crashes your entire system. So you can see maybe CDPR hadn't necessarily communicated with other stakeholders in this whole fucking debacle. In the end, the response was clear. Sony just said, you know what? Fuck it. This was a disaster. This is unprecedented, I think, in the games industry. They just pulled the game from the store because of the controversy and just said, all right, full refunds for everyone, and we're not even selling it anymore. We're just not going to sell it. The game is so broken, and we're going to be jammed up with refunds, and it's going to completely fuck up our customer service team. Let's just pull the game. It's done. It's done. It's over. I don't think I've ever seen this before. I'm really racking my brains. I don't know if you guys can think of another game where something like this happened, but I can't think of any other game that got pulled off digital stores because the sheer volume of refunds was too much to process. Batman Arkham Knight. Yeah, that did get pulled off Steam, didn't it? Yeah, good point. Fallout 76, exactly. Fallout 76 and No Man's Sky were still being sold. So, fair dues, I guess. But anyway, I'll read you this. Sony is pulling Cyberpunk 2077. This was on December 17th. So again, that mad build-up to Christmas to make all that money, the whole reason for the crunch in the process, week before Christmas, we're pulling your game from the digital store, dickheads. And it's no more than CDPR deserve. Cyberpunk 2077 is pulled from the PlayStation Store, and Sony are offering full refunds for anyone who bought the game from the digital storefront. If you want to start the refund process now, they have a special site for it. Sign into your PlayStation account and just submit a request. They said, a Sony statement, we are aware some users are experiencing issues, biggest understatement of all time, accessing the refund form. If you're seeing issues, you may want to try again later. There were so many refunds that even the special website they set up for the refunds was crashing and not working. Right? It was a fucking mess. An absolute mess. Also, CD Projekt Red responded to Sony's decision. The decision was undertaken following our discussion with Sony Interactive Entertainment regarding a full refund for all gamers who had purchased Cyberpunk 2077 via PlayStation Store and wanted a refund at this time. All copies of the game previously purchased digitally on PlayStation Store remain available for use by their respective buyers. Gamers can still buy physical versions of the game in retail and mail order stores. All copies, whether digital or physical, will continue to receive support and updates from the company, which is another insane thing. This is something that I've completely forgotten about, being, part of the fucking PC gamers, right? I forgot about physical copies of games. I haven't bought a physical copy of a game, you know what I mean? Like, physical copies, what are you talking about? Those people, like, it's like another world. Like, what? They were still doing that on PS4. There were people who went out to buy physical copies of the games, and they came in, and it was like, we've got a massive patch that you need to download. I think I saw something on Reddit where some people who had a certain type of PlayStation or a certain type of Xbox didn't even have the hard drive space to download the fucking fixes. Just stuck with a fucking, an ashtray. A $70 ashtray. Fucking hell. What a mess. What a mess. I mean, don't get me wrong. You got to keep up with the times. But equally, like I say, if a product is sold, a product, it must be what it is sold as. And if I buy a physical copy of a game, I want to put it in my system, and I want it to fucking work. And I don't think that's asking too much. Now, we get back to banging on the journalists again. Because I want to talk about SeizureGate. Yes, the journalists had to have one last dig at CD Projekt Red. It's transphobic, it's racist, it's crunch. So we get to SeizureGate. SeizureGate, in case you don't know, was a journalist on Twitter called Liana Ruppet, said, right, I did have a bad seizure while playing this game. Now, just so you know, because this is important to know before we get into breaking all of this down, every piece of media that is distributed across Europe or America has to come with a seizure warning, because certain types of photosensitive epilepsy can be triggered by even something as delicate as the imperceptible strobing of looking at a monitor. I've got epileptic friends who have, photosensitive epilepsy that they're medicated for. And one of the things they will not put themselves through is long periods of time staring at a monitor. They know they've got to take breaks. They know it can be accumulative. And they also can sort of feel when a seizure's about to come on, break away from whatever they're doing. Sometimes it's inevitable that the seizure's still going to go ahead. And it's one of the horrible things about epilepsy is when one's in the pipeline and you know it's coming, there's nothing you can do. You just got to buckle the fuck up. It's awful. I mean, I've been out with them, and they've turned to me and gone, Richard, I am going to have a seizure in a minute or two. And you're like, what the fuck? And, you gotta just, roll them on the side, make sure they don't bite their tongue. They ride it out and I need to go home, It's like, it's awful. To really, photosensitive epilepsy is no fucking joke. And I am sensitive to it because obviously I've got friends that have suffered with it, and I've seen how debilitating it can be. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Now, all of that being said, you will notice a key component of that story. The individual responsibility is that it's a condition you need to manage and you need to be aware of. And anytime you sit down and watch a movie, anytime you sit down and play a video game, anytime you interface with strobing lights for whatever reason, if you're a photosensitive epileptic of a certain type, you are at risk from triggering a seizure. You have to know this, limit your exposure, and I know that sucks. But generally, there are many workarounds you can do to make things easier. But generally, it's one of those things that is going to happen from time to time if you have that condition, even if you medicate. It's sad. It's a sad reality. It's a terrible condition. But we get to SeizureGate. This is where a journalist said, I had a bad seizure while playing this game. But look, I get it. I'm stubborn. I'll push myself for something if the desire is high enough. Don't be like me. If you have any sort of epilepsy leanings, here is what you need to know about Cyberpunk 2077. Be safe, friends. Right? Now, that tweet is very reasonable. And that tweet lays all the responsibility at her doorstep. Right? You couldn't possibly have a problem with that tweet. And I think it's good to let people know. Yes, there are certain scenes in CD Projekt Red's game that might lead to a seizure. Here's the problem. This is why she deserves criticism, because while everyone focused on the tweet you can see below it from the following day, warning, I've been sent hundreds of videos disguised as support that are deliberate flashing to induce photosensitive triggers. If you're sharing this saying you're epileptic and receive a video, don't press play. I'm back to being on my ass. Be better, please. I know people are capable of doing things like that. I know people are awful. I know fanatics and zealots, of which CD Projekt Red definitely have some, will do anything. There is no evidence of this. There is no evidence. There's nothing in the replies. I don't know where these hundreds of videos would have been sent. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, Liana, based on the article I'm about to show everybody, and also just based on games journalists in general and their constant martyrdom, I'm just going to say I don't believe you were sent hundreds of videos. I think maybe one or two, which is absolutely unforgivable and bad enough, but it's very reminiscent of the Kurt Eichenwald situation, where I don't believe he faked a seizure and actually just wanted to use his photosensitive... I do believe he faked the seizure and wanted to use his photosensitive epilepsy to get back at someone who ridiculed him on the internet because he knew he could. That's my opinion. I'm not saying that's a statement of fact. I'm just saying I don't see the evidence, and if you don't show me evidence, I'm not inclined to believe fantastical claims. Anyway, here's the problem. The article. It's a PSA. Brilliant. Well done, Liana. This is good and responsible. But let's just go here, right? Let's just scroll down. Because I tweeted out at the time, saying CD Projekt Red is trying to induce seizures because they're Gamergate or something is so typical of what games journalists have become. How can you even be asked? And lots of people replying going, no one said that. No one said that, Richard. Wait, they're misrepresenting an argument. Now, first of all, there were plenty of people that were saying that, right? Like, not credible journalists, because they try and keep their absurdity just, at the line where it would fall into everyone being able to dispel the nonsense. But let's just get into it, right? It was here, the brain dance scene. Right, so when suiting up for a brain dance, especially with Judy, V will be given a headset that is meant to onset the instance. The headset fits over both eyes and features a rapid onslaught of white and red blinking LEDs, much like the actual device neurologists use in real life to trigger a seizure when they need to trigger one for diagnosis purposes. If not modeled off of the in real life design, it's a very spot-on coincidence, and because of that, this is one aspect I would personally advise you to avoid altogether. So to be clear, this journalist said in an article that they deliberately designed the brain dance to induce seizures. She wrote that down. That is what that sentence says. She says it's either an incredible coincidence, which whenever you say, it's an incredible coincidence, it means you don't believe it's a coincidence. So this is like the claim, and I won't regurgitate the Bill Hicks bit, but it's like the claim about, let's put messages on the records that make our fans fucking shoot themselves. Who wants their audience dead? Who wants their consumers having seizures? No games developer thinks, right, Fucking hell, this'll be a laugh. You know what? They're not doing that, are they? The idea, and that's what I mean. Even when it masquerades as a good thing, even when I'm sympathetic because I know how fucking awful like epileptic seizures can be and how debilitating a condition epilepsy is in general, you have to fucking do it, don't you? You're a games journalist right at your core. You couldn't avoid accusing CDPR of doing something nefarious when you even publicly admit it's your fault. You kept playing. You pushed yourself. You forced yourself. You knew that scene was there. You knew the effects it could have. The only story here, by the way, is media that comes with an epilepsy trigger warning can occasionally trigger epilepsy. How is that news, by the way? Like, am I the fucking idiot here? The warning's there. You didn't heed the warning. You had a seizure. That sucks. I'm really sorry for you. There's nothing to write about there. But they did. This triggered seizure gate. Everyone was all over it. Vice naturally picked up the story. Cyberpunk triggered game reviewer to have epileptic seizure. If you have epilepsy or are prone to seizures, you better take care when playing Cyberpunk 2077. Game Informer associate editor Liana Ruppert reported yesterday they experienced at least one. I mean, she said I had a seizure. At least one. Implying there's more than one. Significant seizure while playing the game. We reached out to CDPR for comment, and they did not immediately respond. Yeah, the warning's not enough, guys. So again, Cyberpunk 2077 with a fucking jaw-breaking yawn. The journalists are at it again. They had to come out and said, thanks for bringing this up. We're working on adding a separate warning in the game, aside from the one that exists. Regarding a more permanent solution, the dev team is currently exploring that and will be implementing it as soon as possible. They rolled out a fix for this in 2 days, I think it was. It became their next high priority, and now it also, even after the fix, carries an additional warning in addition to the warning everyone knows is there, because it has to be there by law on all media. Right? Then they immediately switched. The fans didn't react kindly to Ruppert's guide. They just don't even research this. Don't ask for any evidence. Repeat it. More perplexing, right? Check this. More perplexing is how Sony and Microsoft didn't catch the problem sooner. Console video games have to go through a process called certification, in which the hardware manufacturers approve a game to be published on their platforms by asking developers to hit certain requirements, like having a game not crash, or in this case, not causing a seizure. Any media of this nature can cause a photosensitive epileptic episode. You're not... It's not the game is especially designed to induce a seizure. It's that all media containing flashing lights, etc., can cause seizures. So they do have the process. The game has passed the certification process and has got the warning on it. It's all fine. There's no problem here. It's just another fucking God CD Projekt Red. Get him! Get him! Get him! This is games journalism. Then, Mike Diver of Gaming Bible, formerly of Vice. In other words, we have to acknowledge the inherent cronyism in our business. Shared some of the worst takes he's seen on Twitter. This is games journalist repeats things no one can find anywhere on the internet Were they fabricated? Were they deleted? You decide. By the way, one of the things you get taught when you're a journalist that actually cares about ethics is you don't source other journalists you have working relationships with as proof of a point in a story. You don't do that for obvious reasons. Anyway, genuine comments. Let them have a seizure. The human race will do just fine without them. This is a really horrifying one. This is a non-issue. Spoiler, it is a non-issue. Yes, correct. Might do a better job than COVID. Snowflakes need not apply. I feel so sad. Mate. Games journalism. What a profession. Anyway, we now are gonna... Let's get to the present day. Well, via way of this. This was a disaster, a deserved disaster. Most of the negative coverage about the game's performance, the game's release, the game's content, the lies, the bugs, the glitches, completely fine. A little bit dubious, by the way, that, we didn't know more about that a bit earlier, almost as if there was a lot of those outlets signing those NDAs. But anyway, that's all deserved. This other stuff, the nonsense, the fake claims of racism, the fake claims of transphobia, because you can't understand a piece of art because you're a moron, that not so much. That not so much, right? So... once again, ooh, Richard, you're such a centrist. I know, it's incredible when you think about things with nuance and you don't just dogmatically join a side and then fight to the death when you assess things on their merits. Us bloody centrists. But let's look at the upshot. And listen, this is deserved. I did do a manga villain laugh because you can see here... the CDPR stock price declined 40%. And in fact, if you're a shareholder, you're dropping one of these. So, it's gone. It's got that is not good. That is the opposite of good. I'm not really a big stock market kind of guy, but that is off a motherfucking cliff. So, yeah, get yourself in that GameStop bubble instead. Yeah, that's brilliant. Now, listen, it probably won't stay like this, guys, because, I mean, I don't know if you saw recently, Activision Blizzard shares are now at an all-time high. I'll let you figure out why that is, because, there's no rhyme or reason to it, I guess. But so this will bounce back. But in the short term, this is, reflective of the absolute loss of trust, the absolute lack of faith that this game's ever going to be anything like what it was promised that it was going to be, and rightly so. I mean, I don't know if Internet Historian is going to do a video 2 years from now, the goodening of Cyberpunk 2077, but I won't forgive CD Projekt Red for any of this. This was a fucking rushed, substandard product built on the blood, sweat, and tears of underpaid workers, riddled with lies, and the fact you made The Witcher 3, and I absolutely adore that game, is not going to insulate you from the fact I now think you are the same blood-sucking corporate shill as any other games development company. That's where you live now, CDPR, and you always will live there for me. We jump to the modern day. Jason Schreier, a week ago, published another article about CD Projekt Red, and even though some of the information was just regurgitated information that we already knew, was already in the public domain, because it's Jason Schreier and everyone fawns over him, oh god, someone complained to him about working conditions again, how does he get all of the scoops, I just don't know. This was a full breakdown of the disastrous rollout. The takeaway being they knew before it was released it wasn't fit to be released. They actually knew. He addresses a video apology in there that they released. But the bottom line is he talks to staff members here. And let me just read you some of this. Fans and journalists were wowed by Cyberpunk 2077's ambition and scale. What they didn't know was that the demo was almost entirely fake. You should, by the way, naturally be skeptical of pre-recorded footage that you are sent and told gameplay if you're a journalist of just even amateur levels. But, you know, amateur levels describes the whole industry, doesn't it? CD Projekt hadn't yet finalized and coded the underlying gameplay systems, which is why so many features, such as car ambushes, were missing from the final product. Developers said they felt like the demo was a waste of months that should have gone towards making the game. You see, they took people off fixing the game to rig the demo to make it look good for the reviewers that were going to blindly say how amazing the game was based on a game they hadn't played. Is there anyone out there that's still on CDPR's side, by the way, on this? Like, because I would love to sell them a bridge. It's employees were working long hours, even though Owinski had told staff that overtime wouldn't be mandatory on Cyberpunk 2077. More than a dozen workers said they felt pressure to put in extra hours by their managers or co-workers anyway. There were times I would crunch up to 13 hours a day. A little bit over that was my record, probably. And I would do 5 days a week working like that, said Jakubiak, the former audio programmer, adding he quit the company after getting married. I have some friends who lost their families because of these sorts of shenanigans. They cancelled and aborted features. The team's progress said they felt the game would be ready in 2022. And yet they launched it at the end of fucking 2020. It's like, yeah, I don't know, man. So that was a mess. Anyway, this Jason Schreier report, which, by the way, listen, I know I bang on Jason a lot. It's mostly because he's an absolute fucking, he's a snowflake, buttercup, sensitive boy. And even though, you know, I think we have a lot of overlap in the things we believe, I think he blocked me out. He literally blocked me on Twitter after that esports awards speech when I called out all of the games journalists on stage. By the way, they still haven't got me for that. They're going to try. I know. They keep trying. They still haven't got me. But yeah, he blocked me after that, which is fine. It's his right. He can block whoever he wants. You know, but yeah, this is a good report in general. It prompted a response from Adam Badowski, who is the other co-founder, I believe, from CDPR. He put this statement out, and he replied directly to Jason's article. Let me just read you this. It said, in the bit about the demo being fake, he said, it's hard for a trade show game demo not to be a test of vision or vertical slice 2 years before the game ships. But that doesn't mean it's fake. Compare the demo with the game. Look at the dum-dum scene or the car chase or the many other things. What the people reading your article may not know is that games are not made in a linear fashion and start looking like the final product only a few months before launch. If you look at that demo now, it's different, yeah. But that's what the work in progress watermark is for. Our final game looks and plays way better than that demo ever was. As for missing features, that's part of the creation process. Features come and go as we see if they work or not. Also, car ambushes exist in the final game almost verbatim to what we showed in the demo. That's fake news. I've asked several people who've completed the game this. No, they don't. No, they don't. That is an actual nailed-on lie. That is a lie. And if we get a bit more granular about our release, yep, exactly, they are all scripted, absolutely. And if we get a bit more granular about our release, the vision we presented in this demo evolved into something that got multiple 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s on PC from many renowned gaming outlets in the world. Yeah, they couldn't show footage of the actual game. Some of them didn't even play the game properly or have adequate time to play the game. As for the old gen consoles, yes, that is another case, but we owned up to that and are working super hard to eliminate bugs on PC too. We know that's not a perfect version either, and we are proud of Cyberpunk 2077 as a game and an artistic vision. This all is not what I call disastrous. To the claim most of the staff knew and openly said it wouldn't be ready for release in 2020, you talked with 20 people, some being ex-employees, only one of whom is not anonymous. I wouldn't call that most. Of the over 500 people, staff openly said what you claim. So this is pathetic. This is like standard game developer nonsense. If I have 20 sources that all say, and why he's bringing up that 19 of them are anonymous, your industry is petty, vindictive, spiteful. You have no respect for human life in a way, because you're willing to crunch these people to the ends of the earth for minimum wage so you can make your paper. So, guess what? Turns out in that environment, be anonymous. Be anonymous. It's the only safe way if you want to work in the industry again. I also know a lot of these companies, when there's a report like this, they try and find out who the anonymous sources are. Why? Why conduct your investigations? For reprisals. So even though these people have spoke with their conscience, revealed bad practices, you still want to punish them further, even though these people have already been punished just by virtue of the terrible working practices you put them in. So fuck you. Also, the idea, you have 20 sources all saying the same thing. But you go, but there were another 480 you could... Mate, that's like, right? If I have a slice of cake and I bite into it and it's chocolate flavour and I say, well, that's a chocolate cake. And you go, how do you know? Look at all the cake that's left. What are you even fucking saying, you idiot? Like, how is that a defense? Ridiculous. Anyway. A few non-Polish staffers... Yeah, I'm a fat guy, so I use cake a lot in my analogies, by the way. Yeah, okay. We'll just keep going. A few non-Polish staffers shared stories about co-workers using Polish in front of them. I didn't read this part in the article, which violated company rules, made them feel ostracized. They said, were their co-workers talking shit about them? No, I'm less interested in this. But yeah, one of the things that was brought up was like, some people were talking Polish in front of them and they had that immediate worry that, oh my God, you know, are they saying bad things about me? And it's like a rule in the company that people are meant to speak English because it's a multicultural, multinational work environment. I think anyone who gets upset about people speaking their native language in front of them is a fucking pussy or an idiot a la Smooya. So I'm not even going to address that because it's not really relevant to what we're talking about. Now, I'll also just add, If you go into a bar in fucking North Wales and you ask for a pint in English and you hear a bunch of people on a table grumbling in a language you don't quite understand, they are calling you an English bastard. Just get on with your day would be my advice. Anyway. And so we come to today, where the first patch has been rolled out. Here it is. Patch 1.1. And it's a big one. And they focused on stability. Memory? Will I maybe one day be able to play this game for more than an hour? Maybe by February, kids. Memory usage improvements in various systems within the game, character interactions, navigation, in-game videos, foliage, laser effects, various crash fixes. It's a sizable patch. And PC specific, you can get Steam achievements now, the startup crashes with the NVIDIA graphics card bugs. So, they're getting there. But, as I said, it's all meaningless to me. I don't give a fuck now. CDPR, you know, if you're gonna crunch people and then still fall unbelievably short while people in your company are telling you we need another year, not another week, not another month, another year, and you push this out to make money at fucking Christmas. Like, nah, guys, you're like Electronic Arts now. You know, not as bad, right? But you're knocking on that, you're rubbing shoulders with that company, you're knocking boots with them dudes. That's it. That's all there is to it. But that doesn't mean that the non-stop fucking hysteria from the games journalists is accurate either. Everyone can be bad. It's humanity, after all. So, there you go. That's everything you need to know from start to finish about the Cyberpunk 2077 debacle.